going to read the text, but before I do that, I just want to take just a brief moment to kind of introduce it, because I want you to think about something as you're listening to it. Parables are really a strange way of teaching, and they've definitely lost their popularity, sort of, in the modern world, for a number of reasons that we can discuss some other time. But something that you should think about as you're listening to it is, what in this seems really odd? Like, what doesn't quite make sense? Because parables aren't meant sort of to be these total, comprehensive, sensible stories. They're very strange, and sometimes we give them a pass because it's Jesus, but really think about it as you're listening to it and ask yourself, what in this just doesn't make sense to me? Okay. From Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 through 30 and 36 through 43. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven may be compared to someone who sowed good seed in his field. But while everybody was asleep, an enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat, and then went away. So when the plants came up and bore grain, then the weeds appeared as well. And the slaves of the householder came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then did these weeds come from? He answered, An enemy has done this. The slave said to him, Then do you want us to go and gather them? But he replied, No, for in gathering the weeds, you would uproot the wheat along with them. Let both of them grow together until the harvest. And at harvest time, I will tell the reapers, Collect the weeds first and bind them in bundles to be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. Then he left the crowds and went into the house. And his disciples approached him, saying, Explain to us the parable of the weeds and the field. He answered, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. The field is the world, and the good seed are the children of the kingdom. The weeds are the children of the evil one, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Just as the weeds are collected and burned up with fire, so it will be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will collect out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all evildoers, and they will throw them into the furnace of fire, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Let anyone with ears listen. Word of God for the people of God.
Thanks be to God.
I'm going to lead you on a little journey here. I want to talk sort of generally about parables for a bit before we get into what that means for this specific one. Because parables are difficult for two reasons, I think. First, they rely really heavily on the common knowledge of the audience, which limits who's going to understand them, because we're not first century Palestinian Jews. We live very different lives than they do. Second, they're often a bit vague. Unlike other story-based forms of teaching in the ancient world, parables aren't really super carefully crafted things where absolutely every detail is really important usually. It's really easy to get bogged down in those details. It's not that they're totally meaningless, but the point of parables is really to make a point, not to make every possible point, usually. I don't think, therefore, when we're approaching parables, I should just tell you what it means. That would both be really easy on my part and kind of arrogant. I want to help give some background on this so that when you encounter them in the future, you have tools at your disposal so that I don't just bring you to the destination. I want you to come along with me. Unfortunately, I'm doing this with one of the most irritatingly messy parables I've ever tried to pick apart. I did a paper on this in seminary, which you might think might make it easier for me to preach on, but I never really came to a solid conclusion in that paper, so picking up where I left off doesn't really help a lot. Why is it such a mess, one might ask? Let me count the ways. There are a variety of layers to look at, so I want to start with a couple. And this may seem sort of pedantic, but I think it matters. When we're talking about trying to understand something, to live in a certain way, and when we're talking about discipling based on this, it matters that we take the time and effort to figure out how we actually are going to read it. So first, we're going to look at the narrative. This is kind of what I asked you to think about. For some reason, we're just kind of inclined to give Jesus a pass on sensible storytelling. But, okay, first off, who sits back and lets weeds grow in their garden or field? Like, is this a popular practice amongst anyone? I garden. I don't know how many of you all do. But weeds are not just kind of things that are there that are neutral, right? They choke out your plants. They can wreck your gardens, fields. That's why we spray stuff on them to get rid of them. Is it just me, or does this seem like a really strange thing to talk about when you're talking about fields? And yes, you might tear up a few good plants in the process, but you probably would lose a lot more to them being crowded out. Second, why would an enemy plant weeds? Like this is some of those with like an old, like grew up together kind of rivalry thing, and they're not really trying to destroy or undermine their neighbor, they just want to be really frustrating, right? Because if an enemy in the ancient world, if you wanted to wreck someone's crops, you threw salt in it, right? Not seeds. How do you collect that many weed seeds? Does this guy have like a whole field of weeds and he goes through and harvests bags of them? How many people were involved in this process even? Like, if you're talking about a field, are they running around all night whipping out seeds across? It just seems goofy to me. And then to spread those seeds through the entire field, like maybe a corner or something. But that's just a whole lot of work. And then burning the weeds at the end. Why? Okay, I could sort of theoretically guess. If you wanted to get rid of the plants so that they didn't, if they were already seeding, sort of maybe, but I just throw them in a stack on the edge of the woods and let them rot. Like, they work. There's a whole lot of unnecessary steps in this. We're given everyone else in the explanation. But who are the slaves that are asking about this, right? Like, they're never defined. In the end, you want us to tear them up? Who is asking that? Because if we're all the plants in the field and the harvesters are the angels, then who are the other people even in this conversation? There are just all of these little bits of the story that just don't line up in a lot of ways. So with that whole pile of questions on the table, let's look at some confusing historical context to add to the mess. We live very different lives from people at that time, and most of the recipients originally, we talk about that this is an agrarian society, right? That most people at the time were farmers or worked with farms because, eating is important, and that's always been true. And in a time where they didn't have the ability to produce at the rate we do, it took a whole lot of people to make enough food for everyone. Okay, so we're kind of on that page. But in the region that we're talking about here, in Judea and Samaria and kind of that whole territory, the Romans had basically been systematically kicking everyone off of their farms and either making them day laborers or just straight up slaves. So on the one hand, we're talking about people whose history, whose families, for endless generations may go back as farmers, but most of them, probably very few of them, including Jesus, who didn't grow up a farmer, don't farm themselves. And so he's alluding to something that they know about, because that's what they remember and that's what people around them doing, but it's not something that they're probably doing right now anyways. there would probably be a struggle identifying. The second really interesting thing is that the word here that we read as weeds is actually the name of a specific plant, often called darnel or cockle. It looks almost identical to wheat until it's fully mature, and then you can tell them apart relatively easily, which means kind of a weird timeline question in the story of where are we at? Because if you can tell there's weeds in the field, then it's harvest time already. So how do they know, and how would you tear all that up? I mean, the fields are ready to go, so why would you ask to tear them up now? If it's already to the point where you can see them, you're ready for harvest. Yay! The problematic part with darnel, really, I mean, it looks like wheat, but if even it takes a fairly small amount of it to wreck flour. Like if you were to just harvest it along with the wheat and grind it all together, flour becomes inedible with a fairly small amount. It's poisonous, not like kill you poisonous, but like make you sick and taste really bad poisonous. So the farmer here is in a dilly of a pickle. But there's an even deeper layer of analysis. I'm going to go off script. There's another level to this that we really need to consider. Although now we're getting into like really academic-y stuff and sort of maybe dangerous-y stuff. But that's okay, because we need to know these things and we need to read these things and ask these questions. When you're looking at the Gospels, most of them, I don't know if you noticed, but most of the stories show up in multiple places, right? They're slightly different, but there's multiple versions. This one only shows up in Matthew. And the ones around it don't, but this one does. Which means, from source theory, yay, this wasn't part of Mark, which was probably the first one written, and it's not part of the shared material that Matthew and Luke seem to work from. This is something specific to Matthew. So the author of this text looked at this story and decided to include it when no one else was including it. And I have to ask myself why. My guess, the guess of most scholars, is because this really meant something in the community that he was living in, right? This story either was floating around or he'd heard it from somewhere or something, but this story addressed something that the author really felt people needed to know. It answered a question that was being asked, that maybe wasn't being asked with such ferocity in other places. And I think that question, I think now when we're getting to actually figuring out what the parable is about, is when you look at what is Jesus actually saying we should do with it. Ignore kind of the background questions of why this doesn't make sense. It's a parable. The whole thing doesn't have to make sense. You want a parable that really doesn't make sense? The lost sheep. We can talk about that some other time. Throw that aside. Doesn't matter that the wheat and the weeds look pretty much the same. What is the answer to the question? If Matthew's community is asking the question and this answers it, what is the answer? Let the wheat and the weeds grow together. The early church spent hundreds of years fighting, and I don't mean like gently arguing or, kind of Minnesota nice fighting. I mean angry, vitriolic, writing books, kind of screaming at each other, occasionally beating each other with things, fighting over what the church was supposed to look like and what the expectations were to be a member of one. Hundreds of years embroiled in this, and it probably started really early because there were no clear boundaries given at the beginning. They were putting something together, and they had a teacher, and they had teachings, and what do you know? We get 4 Gospels that are trying to tell the same story, and they sound really different. We figured out real quick we weren't going to agree on everything. So what do? We let the weeds and the wheat grow together. Because like it or not, we're really bad at telling the weeds and the wheat apart. And in the process of trying to fix this problem, of trying to seek something that isn't bad, in trying to be what we think we're supposed to be, we're going to uproot good stuff. This is why our legal system, as frustrating as it is theoretically at least designed around the idea of it's better to let guilty people go than incarcerate innocent people. It doesn't always work that way, but theoretically, because we don't want to undo what other people are doing. Here's where this gets hard for me. I like being right. Does anyone else like being right? Okay? Personal struggle through much of my life. When I get into, I'll call them heated conversations, I'm pretty sure I'm right, and I'm pretty sure I can give you a whole lot of citations for why I'm right, and all the people that can agree with me, and I can draw you some charts if you want. I like being right. I'm good at being right. It is more important for me to be caring than to be right. And that is hard. For me, at least. I'm not going to speak for all of you, but I'm guessing I'm not the only one. It is hard to imagine that those people that you think are so categorically wrong about everything that they could possibly be wrong about, that A, they might not be entirely wrong about everything. You can wish they were. You can still think they are. But regardless, whether they are wrong or not, it is more important that you show them that they matter, that they're worthwhile, that you care about them, than that you're right. Because the moment you give up on that, the moment that being right is more important than them, you've A, lost sight of a whole lot of everything Jesus teaches. But beyond that, even if you are still set on the being right, when you lose that connection to people, you no longer have the opportunity to convince them slowly and lovingly of your opinion. We, as human beings, don't like being wrong about stuff. And whether we're talking academic or not, when someone threatens how we imagine a situation should be, just even theoretically, of how we understand the world, let alone in our actual practical lives, the same part of our brain goes off as when we're attacked by a wild animal, okay? We get defensive, and when we get defensive, we stop thinking, and we stop considering, and we stop caring. We just fight back, or run away. We don't get to do that. We don't get to do that. So by all means, think other people are wrong. I do all the time. And that's okay, because sometimes they are. But in addition to that, imagine for a moment that you may not be right either. And those two aren't mutually exclusive. But also imagine that whether or not they're wrong, they matter. That God cares about them, in this abstraction, if you want, in your head, that we need to care about them. Because, like it or not, this world is a mess. It is a mess, and we all know that. And there is so much beauty in here, and there is so much terror. And in this mess of the world that I just made down here, right? In this mess of the world, we're all in it together. Right? Like we aren't, in the end, gonna pick the winners ourselves, you know? The winners, the ones that Jesus seems to comfort and love, maybe not the people we're always inclined to comfort and love. And the people that say what needs to be said are often the prophets that, get kicked out and thrown on, and the Bible is full of stories of these situations where the people that seem to be adding to the mess are in fact the ones that we need to be listening to most carefully. This world is a field, And it is a messy field, and it is full of weeds, and some of them look just like the wheat, some of them I'm sure don't. But in the end, we all got to grow together, whether we like it or not. Hopefully, we can find joy and peace in sharing love with those weeds. Because just because they're weeds to us doesn't mean they're weeds to God or to anyone else. Let's work together in this messy field of life. Let us be in the struggle, in the mess, together, with the love of God that passes all understanding. Amen.